I heard that you want to start selling your crochet at markets. Come here. I'm going to give you some tips today. Hi everybody, it's Katie the Celestial Homebody, and today I've got a jam-packed informational video for you. If you are new to my channel, welcome. I am an amigurumi crocheter, although I do other crochet as well, but I sell my crochet makes at markets. I just recently started doing this in 2024, but I've got a good amount of markets under my belt now that I feel like I am educated enough on the topic to give you guys all of the tips and tricks about markets, whether you're starting from scratch and wanting to do your very first market and sell your plushies or blankets or clothing, whatever it is that you crochet, or you have been doing markets for a while and want some new tips and tricks. I've got tons of them for you. Today we're going to be going over everything that you need to know about markets. After all, this is the ultimate market guide. We're going to be going over how to find markets, what markets are the best ones to choose from, what to make for your markets, how to price your items, what do you need for your booth, how do you set up your booth, and much more. It's going to be a long one, so sit back, relax, grab a cup of coffee, maybe a notepad and a pencil too, because you might want to take some notes on some of these things. And I will remind you that everything that I talk about that has a link will be in the description box below, including the timestamps. So if you're looking for a very specific section of the video, feel free to use those timestamps to go to where you need to go. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we're going to start with, how do you find craft shows and markets? And any YouTube video that you watch on this subject is probably going to tell you check Facebook. And I wholeheartedly concur. Go on Facebook and simply search your location. So for example, Atlanta, Georgia, craft shows, Atlanta festivals, Atlanta vendors, things like that, and join these groups. Not only will you possibly be able to find some of your events, but you also might make some vendor friends on there. You might learn a lot from other people's display setups, things like that, pictures that they post of asking for feedback on what they could do better. You can learn from the comments on those videos. Facebook is a great place to check. Also, Google. I mean, literally just Google craft fairs in Atlanta, Georgia, festivals in Atlanta, Georgia. It's really that simple. I mean, it's not rocket science here, but I want to give a disclaimer, because specifically on Facebook, scammers are all around, okay? A lot of times they will comment on your comments, like they'll respond to you, or they will just post, I'm having an event at this date, at this time, at this location. Please send your deposits to this PayPal, this Cash App, Venmo, etc. These are immediate red flags. Number one, if there is no direct contact information to an organizer with their name and their email, that is red flag. And also, even if there is a email and a name, if their email has nothing to do with their name or has nothing to do with the event, like for example, if it's the Southern Indiana Renaissance Festival, then that might be in their email. And if I'm emailing Deborah at the Southern Indiana Renaissance Festival, maybe in her email it's Deborah. If her email is like alexandertejon@gmail.com, red flag. Run, girl, run. Okay? Also, if they accept only payment through PayPal or Cash App or something like that, also a red flag. And I'm not saying that these don't happen genuinely when you're signing up for markets. They can. Just be wary, okay? There are a lot of scammers out there. What they'll do is they'll take your deposit money. There won't actually be an event, and you won't actually have a table spot, and you'll just be out your $50, $75, even $250 deposit, which I just want to warn you about to avoid. So be wary of scammers on Facebook. So another hot tip that I have for you, besides looking out for scammers, although that's not a hot tip, that's just do it. This is a unique hot tip that I haven't seen anybody else talking about on YouTube. And trust me, I did my fair share of video watching on the subject when I was preparing to do my very first market. Look at festival pamphlets for your city, state, and or county. So on like your county's website, their visitor page, or your city, if you live in a larger city. I live in a really small town, but we still have a festival pamphlet. There, it's just not very big. If you go to the county, they will have a couple 100-page PDF, likely on their visitors website, that is all of the festivals listed for the upcoming year. So for 2025, for example, if you live in Atlanta, Georgia, you can go to Atlanta, Georgia visitor page, or you can search Atlanta, Georgia Festivals 2025. This brings me to point number 2, is choosing the right events. And the reason that these kind of connect is because when you look for festivals near you that are not craft shows, then you have a lot higher rate of success. And here's why. At a craft show, it attracts crafters. Naturally, that makes complete sense. But you likely won't be the only crochet artist there. In fact, you might be one of 10 if the event organizer is completely just greedy and just wants the deposit money and doesn't care about how many of each type of craft there is, which happens quite oftenly, unfortunately. Then that market is going to be incredibly saturated and you're likely not going to make great sales. Here's why I say festivals are the way to go. Twofold. Number 1, they don't attract the craft crowd for vendors. We're talking mostly food trucks, mostly like t-shirt sellers. I mean, I guess that could be a craft, you know what I mean. Doing like heat press and things like that is a craft, but we're talking like airbrush, little stations of t-shirts and things like that. Festivals attract more of the non-craft vending crowd. So you have a much higher chance of being the only or one of a few crochet artists there, making the market not as saturated, therefore raising your sales, hopefully. The second reason, because I did say it was twofold, that festivals are good, is because they attract kids. And kids is where you get the majority of your sales. Especially if you sell little $5, $10 items, you are going to rake in that money just by impulse buys of the parents walking by with kids on their way to the food trucks, on their way to the bounce houses, the petting zoos, whatever it is at the festivals, even adults on their way to the concerts, the nighttime activities, the fireworks shows. The patron market is going to be a lot bigger because they're not there specifically to buy crafts, to buy gifts. They're there for another reason, and that's how you're going to get those impulse buys. So festivals, phenomenal. Highly, highly recommend not spending your time going to craft shows. That also includes farmers markets. I'm not saying that doing craft shows or farmers markets aren't profitable. They definitely can be if you get a good one and the event organizer is on top of it and not saturating the market with a bunch of different vendors of the same craft. But farmers markets are kind of the same thing. People go there to buy vegetables, fruits, things like that. They're not going to buy plushies or to buy gifts. Something else that you might want to do as well is to email the coordinator of the event and ask what the anticipated patron turnout is going to be. If it is a show that has been going on for multiple years, then they should have a really good idea of how many people they expect. And this will give you a good idea of where to put your time in, because you have to remember that you are one person crocheting thousands, at least hundreds of dollars worth of inventory for a single market event. So if you are, between, let's go to this craft show with a $50 deposit and anticipated turnout is 200 people, maybe you don't want to spend your time crocheting for that market and instead crochet building up tons of inventory, thousands and thousands of dollars worth of inventory for this festival that they're expecting a 30,000 patron turnout of, with a maybe slightly higher deposit of $100 or something like that. So email the event coordinator and see if they can give you a gauge on how many people are expected to be there. And this actually brings us to how much to make. How much do you make? Well, that's a hard question, because I always tell people you can't sell what you don't have. So make as much as you possibly can. Make as much as you possibly can, and make different color variants of things as well, because what's that saying? Don't yuck my yum. Some people might look at something and be like, ooh, that thing's ugly. And another person might look at it and be like, I love that color combo. So make different color variations of things, different sizes of things. The more variety you have, the better. The variety of the spice is the spice of life, after all. But I do have a tip about not displaying them all at the same time later in the video, so keep watching for that. So also in terms of how much to make, I would say limit holiday items most of the time. Limit holiday items, because if they don't sell, then you're stuck with them until next year. And again, when you are one person trying to build up your inventory, especially if you're starting from scratch and you're working on holiday items and you're putting, 20, 30 hours into doing these little gingerbread man and they don't sell at your Christmas market, that is time gone that you could have had preparing evergreen items that you could save for the next market, because those little gingerbread men are going to sit in your totes now until next year, unless you want to clearance them, which I personally am not a fan of clearancing your crochet. Even if they're out of season, I say just save them, because it doesn't change the amount of time and material that you put into making them. So clearancing them is kind of a sellout in my opinion, but that might be a controversial opinion. That brings us to, what should you make? Make things that you want to. I think that along with this category should be avoiding burnout. And I think one good way to do that is to not push yourself to make things that are necessarily best sellers. You might look up YouTube videos about like market bestsellers. I mean, I even have one uploaded right now that is market bestsellers. And I think that they're good to watch and to have in the back of your mind if you've got some free time and want to make some of those bestsellers. But if you're like loaf cats, they're a bestseller, but I just despise making them, then don't make them. Do not make them, because you are going to burn yourself out making loaf cat after loaf cat and hating your life. Instead, focus your time on things that you really enjoy making. So that brings me to best sellers. Should you make the best sellers? Sure. If you like making them, then make the things that sell for sure. So I'm not going to go over all of the best-selling market items in this video. I will make another video about that later on. I want to get a couple more markets under my belt before I talk about the overall bestsellers, because I have really only done shows in the fall and winter season as of right now. So I don't feel comfortable yet saying like all year round what are bestsellers. So stay tuned for that. Make sure to subscribe so that you can get reminded when I post that video later on this year. Smaller and cheaper items are going to bring you more money than bigger items. And this seems a little counterintuitive because you think a $45 item is a lot more money than $5 item, but your clientele of who will be able to afford the $5 item and who will want to spend the $5 is a lot larger of a pool than the patron who wants to dish out the 45 bucks or more. So when you're market prepping, little quick items that are in the $5 to $10 range is where you want to spend your time. Now, I do think that it's a great idea to also have some bigger items, and even one I would call a gigantic item as a showpiece to bring people into your booth, which we'll get a little more into later when we talk about how to display things. But have a couple bigger items to draw people in, but especially if you do those events with all of the kids, you need the what I call shut up items, where they want something and they're like, Mommy, I want this. And then the parent's just like, okay, fine, it's $5. Here you go. Let's be on our way. So spending your time on small items, way to go. Absolutely way to go. You're going to end up making more money selling those little guys instead of dedicating time to making the bigger items. No-sew patterns are great. No-sew patterns are fantastic because they're quick. You can make them sitting there at the market. Again, they create that lower price point. Therefore, you will sell more of them and make more money. So, highly recommend no-sew patterns. So now let's talk about pricing your inventory. And I apologize for the change of scenery and the costume change and the dog change, because my original file in which I recorded this segment got corrupted. So here we are, re-recording. So this might be kind of a controversial topic just because a lot of crochet artists are very particular on how they price their items, specifically taking into account their material costs. And there are many calculators out there. You can use an Excel spreadsheet to put in like the cost of your safety eyes, the stuffing. You can weigh out in grams the yarnage that you used. That is too much math for me, and for somebody who has a phobia of math, I am not about that. Plus, I have already spent the money on the yarn and the stuffing, and so when I make something out of it, it's free. Girl math, am I right? So here is generally the considerations that I take into account when I price my items. So firstly, the cost of supplies does go into account. Now, like I said, I don't use like a mathematical formula to calculate how much stuffing I used, how many cents each safety eye was, etc. But I do know that if I'm using a more expensive yarn, like a jumbo weight yarn, then I might charge an extra $1 or $2 for the finished product. If I'm using something like a Parfait Chunky, which is super cheap yarn, I'm not going to add any additional charge to my project. So consider your cost of supplies. If you're using a really bougie yarn, you might want to put an extra margin on that finished product. Next, I consider the time that I spent on my product. Obviously, you have to pay yourself for your time. And as a crochet artist, you have a particular skill that not a lot of people have. So you should be compensated for that skill. depending on where you live, kind of gives you a baseline of the base amount that you should be charging yourself, the bare minimum. So here in Indiana, the minimum wage is like $7, $7.50 or something like that. So I generally charge myself or pay myself $15 an hour, which is a definite like upgrade from the minimum wage where I live. If you live somewhere like in California where the minimum wage is like 18 bucks, then you're going to want to charge yourself, I keep saying charge yourself, you're going to want to pay yourself like $15 an hour in order to compensate for your time and the unique skill that you possess. So take that into account as well. Also consider the size of your finished product. Unfortunately, there have been times where I have spent so long, 5-6 hours on a plushie, and it turns out to be like this big because I use like a 5mm hook and a parfait chunky, and I'm like, I spent so much time on this, but nobody's gonna pay $65 for a plushie that's this big, no matter how detailed it is. I'm sorry about her. So as I was saying, the size of your finished product might unfortunately decrease the price that you can charge for it. On the other hand, though, if you use like a size 7 jumbo yarn on a pattern that's meant for acrylic and it doesn't take you that long and it turns out gigantic, then you can put a premium price on that because of the size. Even if it only took you an hour, the size indicates that it could be, you know, $65, even $70. A perfect example of this is a sunflower turtle that I did that I used burnout blanket for, and it was meant to be like a little sea turtle, and I got a $55 price for it, even though it only took me like an hour to do. You're also going to want to take into account the demand of the critter, and this is tricky if this is your very first market. I am so sorry if Paisley is distracting. I'm so sorry. She is a Velcro dog. She's a doodle. If you have a doodle, you know she will not want to be outside because she'll sit at the door and cry the entire time that I'm in here. So anyways, if you're doing your very first market, it's difficult to know what your high demand critters are. But it's easy to kind of gauge the market just by watching YouTube videos like this, what is selling. Those best-selling items like cats, axolotls, capybara, all of those types of animals sell really well. So you can put a little bit of a markup on them because you know that they're going to fly off the shelves. An example of this is the very first market that I did. I made some possums and I completely underestimated how popular possums were. And by the way, I talk all about that market recap and what were my best sellers in another video on my channel. So go check it out. But I put an $18 price on the possums because of the amount of time that it took me, the size, all of that stuff, everything else that we've talked about so far. And they just flew. They were gone within the first 2 hours of the market. And this was a 2-day market, 12 hours a day. And so I immediately was like, I'm going to make some more of these, but I need to raise the price because I guess they're too cheap, because you want people to want to buy your stuff and be able to afford it, but there is a very fine line between not making it so cheap that you're missing out on a couple dollars, because even though I just raised the price $2 to $20, they still sold, and that $2 per possum did add up toward my total amount profit. So take into account the desirability of what it is that you're making. Also take into account the enjoyability of making it. And this might be a little controversial. Some people might say that it's like wrong to charge extra for something just because you didn't enjoy making it. But I say it's your business, so you price things how you want to. For me personally, I will absolutely put a premium on an item if I hated making it. If I struggled through the entire pattern, even if I shed maybe some tears making that pattern, you better betcha I'm going to get that extra $10, $15 price on it, because I won't be making another one. So, on the other hand, if it's a super easy, mindless pattern that you can just binge watch TV while you are making, like the gummy bears, I use gummy bears a lot as an example because they're such an easy make, or the stress pets, which I have a tutorial about on my channel as well. The stress pets, they take like me 10 minutes and I have the pattern memorized, so I can just mindlessly sit there and do it while I'm binge watching Dexter, and it's no big thing. I can put a lower price on that and I'm okay doing so because I know it was no sweat for me. And then the last factor that you might want to consider when you're pricing your items is the event that you plan on selling them at in specific. And there is no shame in repricing your items per market that you go to. I actually highly recommend that you do so. And here's why. If your first show is at a farmer's market, as I said previously in the video, people are going to the farmer's market to buy groceries, to buy artisanal honeys and syrups and things like that. They're not really going to buy stuffed animals or clothing. Not that they don't, but typically that's not the kind of clientele that is there at the farmer's market. Your prices might be a little bit lower to encourage more sales. However, if you're doing an event where really the only reason to go to the event is to spend money, then you can increase your prices by a small margin. And here's a great example. In March of this year, I don't have confirmation yet, but I have applied to do Comic-Con, to event at Comic-Con. And I'm a little nervous about it because that is a big undertaking. I mean, I need like $10,000 worth of inventory, which is a lot for one person and a mom of a 3-month-old to do. But that's neither here nor there. I was going to say that at an event like a convention with tons of people, what's the point of going to a convention besides dressing up and spending money on things that you like, right? And then maybe meeting, like your favorite people from Star Trek or whatever, whoever happens to be there, and getting autographs signed. But most people who are going to conventions love walking through Artist Alley and looking at all of the vendors and buying the pins and the stickers and the art prints and everything like that. So maybe my prices on my items might have a slight markup when I take them to Comic-Con instead of when I do a little show here in my hometown. That is something to consider. And finally, in this category, is whether or not you should tag your items. And this is really a personal preference. What I like to do is I will tag the larger items that I have one-offs of. But if I have multiples of a item, so for example, gummy bears, I might have 20 of, I might have 3 possums, 15 loaf cats, etc. I will make signs that I put on the tables to indicate the price of those items. And I will specify, I won't just put $5. I will specify gummy bears, $5. And on some signs, I might put multiple things. So for the fall festival that I did, I had spooky buddies in which I put pumpkins, ghosts, candy corn, buddies, and then next to each of them, there was the price for each one so that people could immediately see without having to ask me, because you'd be surprised how many people that deters. If you're an introvert like I am, you might shy away from purchasing something from a booth if you cannot readily see how much it costs just because you don't want to have to ask. Hands up in the comments if you can relate to that, okay? Also, it is helpful to have at least some signage with your pricing, especially the cheaper items, so that when people peer into your booth or do a quick glance walking around, they can see how cheap your items are because they're only looking at you know, the $5-10 items in your booth. So they say, oh, this is a reasonably priced booth. I can afford to walk in there and have my kid fall in love with something and have to buy it, right? And then you put the tags on the bigger items. So they pick it up and then have to look at the tag to see how much it is. So tagging, up to you. You can absolutely tag individual items. For me personally, I think that on the table it looks messy, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit about how to display items. But I think that having all the tags hanging down is not a clean look. It personally bothers my OCD, but that's just me. And it takes a long time to tag things. If you have ever tried to put the little strings through the stitches of your plushies, and it takes a long time. Also, regarding tagging items and signage for pricing, I have a link in the description below of these little acrylic clips that fit so perfectly onto little baskets and things that you can clip your signs into. And for the price signs that I use, I hand draw them. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later when we talk about like displaying. But the price signs that I use, I hand draw them onto blank index cards, and then I just run them through the laminator to make them nice and durable. And then you can clip them into those little acrylic clips to sit on top of your crates or your other display pieces, and they hold them there. It holds up in wind, and you can reuse them again and again. Some people like to use the little chalkboards from the Dollar Tree and hot glue them to a clothespin. I almost said safety pin. A clothespin to put on your baskets, and that completely works too. I kind of shy away from the whole chalkboard thing just because in transport, I don't know if they're going to get like scratched or damaged or anything. And the last thing I want to have to worry about setting up on market day is having to take my chalk pen and rewrite the prices. So that is an option. I just prefer to do the index card lamination method. So now let's talk about what you need for your booth. And please let me know in the comments if you can think of anything else that I missed. I really racked my brain and I went through all of my market stuff and I wrote down everything that I could think of. But let me know if I missed something. So these first couple of things are non-negotiables. I think you have to have them. Bare minimum, okay? Tables and tablecloths, bare minimum. Sometimes an event will provide you with a table and or a tablecloth. Most of the time they'll give you a table, not a tablecloth, but at some events they do. If you're wondering, are tablecloths necessary? Yes. Yes, they are. They just create a clean look to your booth. You don't want to make your booth look like it's a flea market or a yard sale. You want to create a distinguished professional vibe to your booth. So tablecloths, absolutely a necessity. You choose the color. I would recommend either black or white, something neutral. Some people like to go with their brand color scheme and do like blue or something like that, which I think is totally fine. I just prefer a neutral backdrop so that when I lay out my display, the items speak for themselves and people can really truly see the color of the items. I just feel like it might entice people, you know, draw people more to a specific item instead if it's washed in a sea of all pink, you know, or whatever color you choose. So tables and tablecloths. How many tables you need depends on the market, how big your booth space is. Sometimes you will only get an inline 6-foot booth space, an inline 8-foot booth space. Sometimes you'll get a whole 10 by 10 tent space if you're doing an outdoor space. I think bare minimum what you should have on hand is an 8-foot table and a 6-foot table in your garage or wherever you keep your market stuff. 4-foot tables are also helpful. I like to use my 4-foot tables as my little checkout table. So I'll have my display set up with my 6-foots and 8-foots, and then I'll have my little 4-foot kind of sitting at the back of my booth where I put like my cash box, my phone charger, all of that stuff. So 4-foot table is definitely good to have. And pro tip for you, get tables that have the little handles on them to carry and that fold, because if you've ever tried to shove an 8-foot table into a compact car, you know things don't fit. And to most of these markets, you need to get everything in the car in one trip. So invest in the tables that fold up. Also, bare minimum, you need price tags like we just talked about. You have to have some way of displaying your prices to the customers, because like I said, a lot of people aren't going to want to have to ask you how much something is. Plus, at a market, you've got enough happening in your mind. You don't need to be thinking about like, how much was I going to sell that for when somebody asks you, how much is this? And you say, oh shoot, was I going to do 35 or 45 for that? Okay. Have price signs or tag items, as we just discussed. Also, bare minimum, a cash box. And some people might tell you that a cash box is not necessary. You can just put it in a fanny pack or something like that. If you are as profitable as you want to be, you need a cash box, because number one, it keeps things organized. Number two, I feel like it's safer, especially if you get the ones that lock. Keep your key on your person so that even if, I don't know, somebody walks by and tries to take money out of the cash box, it's locked. They're not going to be able to do that. You can even go as far as like zip tying it to your table in some way so that somebody can't run off with it. I have never heard of that happening, but I'm sure that it has, because there are crazy people out in the world. So cash box, necessary to keep things organized. If you are busy, you are going to be so frantic and stressed about keeping one eye on making sure nobody steals anything, one eye on answering questions, one eye on trying to get change for people. You don't want to be fumbling through a bag or a fanny pack to try to find, the amount of 5s and 1s that you need to make change. Next is a card reader. This is also an absolute necessity. And the good news for you is if you go to Square's website, square.com, you can get a free card chip reader that just goes right into your phone. It's not a chip reader, I'm sorry. It's like a swipe thing. You just have to enter in some basic information. It does ask for your social security number because you only get one free per person. It asks basics about your business, address, phone number, email, all that kind of stuff. But they'll send it right to your house. And this will enable customers to be able to pay via card, which is absolutely a necessity. Next up on the absolutely must-have list is a chair. You need a place to pop your booty when it's slow, which unfortunately with any market, even if it's a busy one, there will be slow times. And some markets are all day long, 12 hours a day. You do not want to be on your feet that long. So bring a chair, camping chair, any chair really that you want to bring, you can bring. Folding is always the best way to go, because just like the tables, it needs to be able to compactly fit into your car. So now let's move on to you don't have to have, but they're nice to have things. A tent. And this actually arguably goes on the have to have list if you're doing outdoor markets. If you're only planning on doing indoor markets, you don't need a tent. But having a pop-up tent along with the weights, you can use water weights, sand weights, whatever you prefer, is necessary for an outdoor event to keep the weather off of you. Whether it be sunny, rainy, here in the Midwest, during markets, it has been hailing. And I recommend investing in a tent that will hold up. They're not cheap. It is an investment. I keep saying that word for a reason, because if you get like an $89 one from Walmart, it might last you 1 or 2 outdoor markets. And if it rains or you have any sort of wind or anything, that baby is going to be flying across the park. And it's going to be really embarrassing, or the canopy is going to rip. So go on Amazon, invest in a high quality tent. And like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm going to link everything that I am suggesting in the description box down below if you're interested in what I use. I also like the tents that have the optional sides. There was a market that I did where got to the afternoon and the sun was just beating onto everything. Like all of my stuffed animals were just heating up because the sun was beating so hard. So it was nice being able to just pop that optional side up and get some of that sun off of the inventory and off of me and my husband who were working. Next up is objects for adding height. And again, optional, but I highly, highly recommend. You can use wooden crates. They sell these at Joann's. They look phenomenal on the tables, but they do not collapse. So they're kind of a nightmare to have to transport. So maybe if you want to bring like 2 or 3 of these, because they do nest inside of each other when you're transporting them. I think you can get 3 into like one box. So bring 3 of them to do one little display with the crates and no more, because it takes up valuable real estate in your car on your way to these shows. You can get the cube displays like I have behind me, and these come in all sorts of colors. I have the clear ones, but a lot of people like the grids, because on the grids you can hang like keychains and hooks and whatnot on those. I personally don't like the look of the grids. I think that when you look at your whole display as a whole, that it looks messy because of all of the lines. But that's just me. They are definitely more functional than the solid ones like I have back here. But these grid squares are great because they collapse. They're not the fastest thing to put together. It'll probably take you 20-30 minutes during your setup time just to put together the squares. But they're great for adding height. And the reason that you want to add height to your display is when you just set stuff on your table, like I said earlier, it kind of gives the vibe like it's a flea market and you just have a bunch of random piddly crap, as my mom would call it, that's just sitting out flat on a table. You know, it gives yard sale vibes, which you don't want. When you create height, it is more visually interesting to the buyer. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later when we discuss how to set up your display. But objects for adding height, highly recommend. Next up, I recommend that you get a sign indicating what payment info, your payment information, what payments you take. Maybe one that says, I accept cash, card, Apple Pay, Venmo, PayPal, and even go as far as having your QR codes listed so that people can just scan it with their phone. Again, you don't want to have customers ask you, do you take cash? Do you take Cash App? Etc. Just have it displayed there so that they know right off the bat when they walk into your booth, I can buy something here. That would be a major bummer if you didn't have like your card reader, or for whatever reason couldn't take cash and somebody fell in love with something and then you said, oh, sorry, we don't take Venmo, and they say, all I have is Venmo. I can't pay you any other way. So have that displayed. You can even have it displayed 2 places, maybe one like as you're walking into your booth and then one at like your little checkout area. I just have one displayed at my checkout area. Next, we have, this is for an outdoor event, and if you're doing a nighttime market, is lights. You don't want to go without lighting because you'd be surprised how dark it gets at parks and places where these events are held. And if nobody can see your merchandise, nobody's going to want to buy anything. So what I do is I hang bulb lights, like Edison bulb lights, around the perimeter of my tent. Does take a little bit of time to set up, and they are glass bulbs, so to delicately wrap them around the canopy does take a little bit of time, but I love the warm glow that it gives. It lights it up, but also creates this celestial vibe, which fits both my channel name and my vibe today. You can also get lights from the brand Ryobi, or Ryobi, however you say it. the lime green tool brand that you get at Lowe's, they have battery operated lights that you can hang from your canopy or set on your tables. However you want to do lighting is completely up to you, but I do think that they are necessary if you plan on doing outdoor nighttime markets. Next, something that you might want to have is business cards. And I feel like most people are kind of drifting away from the business card model at this point because of sustainability and all that stuff. And a lot of times, if you just give people business cards with their purchase, you'll find them laying all over the ground at the festival because people don't really care about them. So I do have business cards, but I don't just give them out to people. I just have them sitting at my little checkout stand next to my payment sign so that if people want to grab one, then they're going to grab one. That way I know that they're not going to waste, and people who are reaching for them typically have a purpose. You know, they want to remember me to order something custom or for next year's market or whatever the reason they may be. Having business cards is a good idea, but instead of doing paper business cards, you could also do, I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but it is like a thing that goes on the back of your phone, and it's like a touchless business card or something. So people just hold their phone up to yours and then it sends them all of your information. It's like a digital business card. I can't think of the name right now. I'm so sorry, but that's an option too if you don't want to get physical business cards. Also, this might arguably be a must-have, but I didn't include it on the list because it is an investment. It's a banner that has your business name on it, that has your social media handles, your website, all of that important information. Here's a pro tip for you though. Avoid putting QR codes on your banner. I made this mistake the first time I ordered business cards actually, is I put a QR code that people could just scan and it would take them to my Etsy shop. But QR codes can expire, and I didn't realize when I generated this QR code that in order to actually use it, I had to pay a monthly subscription fee that was like $39.99 a month, something exorbitant. I don't know how you say that word, but you know what I mean. Crazy expensive, and I didn't want to pay that. So the 500 business cards that I ordered for markets the first time, I can't use because you try to scan the QR code and it says like this site doesn't exist or something like that, or can't reach this site. So avoid putting a QR code on your banner, because if that QR code changes, you're going to have to pay for a new banner. So just list out your website, your social media handles, all of the important information that you want people to know how to contact you. And of course, your logo and your business name. You might even want to put your name on there too. Like on mine, it's the Celestial Homebody Handmade Crafts by Katie. It's just a little bit more personal. It adds a little bit of a personal touch to it. Okay, and then finally on an optional, and this again is really for outdoor markets, although some indoor markets do get hot, is a fan. If you have electricity at your event, then you can bring like a box fan or something to put in your booth to keep you cool. But Ryobi, I don't know how you say it, the green brand at Lowe's, the green tool brand, they also have, in addition to the battery operated lights, also have a battery operated fan. You can even get like a little hook for it that you can hang from your canopy to blow onto the customers. I am personally selfish, and when I bring a fan, I just set it on the table and just let it blow on me. But that's me. All right, so that is all for what you need for your booth. So once you have all of your crochet items, once you have all of the items for your booth, you need to prepare to set up your display. And it is essential that you prepare your display ahead of time, that you go out to your garage or your backyard or your living room, wherever you have the most amount of room, and you get an idea of your space, your table layout, how you're going to display your items. And you might be saying, I don't have my tables yet. You know, how do I do this? It can be as simple as just marking, taking a tape measure, measuring out your 10 by 10 space, marking it on the ground with painter's tape or pillows or something, just to get an idea of how much space you actually have. The first market that I did, I was hearing 10 by 10 space and I was thinking like, oh man, that's going to be like a little mini store. I'm going to have so much room. I'm happy that I laid it out ahead of time, because if I hadn't, I would have gotten there and had a major freak out panic attack moment trying to set up an hour before the market and being like, I don't have room for all of my plushies. So lay it out ahead of time. So let's talk about how to set up your display and some tips. Let's start with the basics of table layouts. There are tons of different ways that you can lay out your tables, and of course it depends on the size space that you have. Most commonly for outdoor markets, you're going to have a 10 by 10 space. Most commonly for indoor markets, you're going to have a 6-foot or an 8-foot table space, typically in an inline, unless you get lucky and you're on a corner, in which case you might have like an 8 by 8 or a 6 by 6. So here is an infographic of different table layouts. You choose what feels best to you, but here is my 2 cents on the matter. You want to pick a layout that does not feel claustrophobic for customers. When there are 5 people wanting to look in your 10 by 10 little space, that gets crowded really quickly. And if you do like a Z formation or a U, all of the people in your tent feels very, very claustrophobic. So I prefer to do an L shape, or if you're going to do a U shape, make sure that you have at least 2 sides of your U open. If you have, like the tent panels down, at least 2 sides of your U open to get like a cross breeze, because people might be a little stinky at outdoor markets. I don't know from personal experience. But an L shape is my preferred way to go. Z shape is, I feel like, more common now. A lot more people are experimenting with it, but what I don't like about it, especially if you add height to your display, as we talked about earlier, is you cannot see over like the middle part of the Z, and you don't want people stealing your stuff after all that time that you spent on making your crochet items. You don't want people swiping it, and so I don't like not being able to see my entire booth. So what I like to do is I will create an L, and then I will, with a 10 or an 8-foot table and a 6-foot table, and then in the back corner I'll put my little 4-foot table for like the checkout area. That way I have a hawk-eye view of everybody surrounding my tent, everybody coming in. Here's another pro tip for you. If you can, I actually talked about this in another video of mine, so if I'm repeating this information, if you've heard it before, I apologize. But if you can, scooch your tables outside of your tent just a tad to display your showpiece item, that gigantic item that you brought that took a ton of time, that it has a crazy high price on it because it's just that fantastic. Put that out on your table that is outside of your tent a little bit. That way, as people are walking by, down the path, and even if you have like one of those side panels up on your tent, they can't see in, but they can see that giant plushie there sticking out of your tent. That's going to entice them to want to come in and see what else you have going on. Some events are very strict about not going outside of your 10 by 10 space, but if you can scooch it out just a tad or scooch your tent back a little so your table sticks out a little farther, do that. That also goes for sticking your tables out a little bit to the sides to give your customers more room inside of your canopy to freely walk around and look at things without feeling so elbow to elbow with other people. Advice about putting your lower priced items lower and your higher priced items higher on your display. We talked earlier about why it's important to create space in your display, but let's talk a little bit about the psychological effects of laying things out this way, specifically on children. Have you ever noticed how at the grocery store checkouts, all of the candies and stuff are lower on the shelves, and then all of the gum and stuff is higher on the shelves. Do you know why that is? It's because who's looking lower at the shelves? The people with the eyeballs that are right at that lower shelf height, which is children. So if you put your lower priced items on the table, then you're going to get more children gravitating toward those, and the parents are like, it's $5, you know, we can buy it. The higher priced items should go up higher because, number one, the adults are going to have to grab them, and you're not going to have a little snotty-nosed kids who are like, and then grabbing your plushies or rubbing their little greasy peanut butter fingery hands all over your items. And adults mainly are going to be grabbing them from the top shelves. It also looks nice when you look into your tent. As adults, you know, you're looking at your eye height. And I mean, I'm 6 foot tall. I'm like freakishly tall. So for me, I tend to look higher. I look at the roof of the canopy. But for most people at the average height range of, 5'6" or whatever, 5'8", they're going to be looking at that top horizon where all of your larger, more expensive plushies are, which they're going to gravitate toward. So lower priced objects, lower on your table, higher priced objects, higher on your table. You're going to want to group like objects together. And what I mean by like objects is obviously if you have multiples of an item, if you have 25 gummy bears, you want to put all of your gummy bears together and don't put half here and half elsewhere. That's just chaotic. Also, what I mean by grouping like items is if you have a lot of sea creatures, for example, put all of your sea creatures together because somebody might be looking for a specific critter and know where to go, where to gravitate toward to find them. If you've got turtles and stingrays and squid all in one area, they might say, "Ooh, I really want an octopus." They can just look in that section and there they go. They find their octopus without having to ask you, "Do you have any octopi?" A con to grouping like objects is that they're then not looking around the rest of your table or the rest of your booth to look for that item, but I haven't found that that's the case. Normally they'll find something, like they'll find a squid, for example, and then they'll ask me, "Do you have any octopi?" They don't take the time to look around anyway. So group like objects just for the courtesy of your customers. Also, avoid clutter. What I mean by avoid clutter is I call it the home goods effect. Have you ever walked into a home goods and been so overwhelmed by everything that's happening? The assault to your eyes of all of the colors and all of the textures and everything. Maybe it's just me. Actually, I know for a fact it's not just me. This is what I call the home goods effect. If you have so much in your booth, on your table, it creates the opposite effect of what you want to have. You think, I want to put more out so that people of every taste can find something that they like. But what this ends up doing for most people is they get overstimulated and they just do a quick glance and then they leave because their eyes cannot focus on one thing. Or like when you go to Walmart and you're looking for pasta sauce and there is 15 shelves of pasta sauce and you're like, I'm overstimulated. That's why I like to shop at Aldi because there's 2 choices. So if you are bringing a lot of different one-off things, fantastic for you. More inventory is good, but don't put it all out at once. Replace items as they go, okay? And I know that this is so hard because you're like, but what if the customer who was looking for the specific item already came in and then they left because they didn't find anything? I know that is a deep, dark rabbit hole that you can fall into, but try to avoid that, okay? If they specifically asked for something, "Do you have any octopi?" You can say, "Yes, I have some in my back stock, just 1 second." And then perfect, it was meant to be. But try to avoid clutter on your tables by putting out everything at once. Next, create easy to read signage with prices. Handwritten signs, number one, can be hard to read unless you have fantastic handwriting. They can be hard to read. I have personally, not being a vendor, gone to like festivals and wanted to buy something and they have signs and I'm like, is that a 1 or a 2? Is that $15 or $25? And again, I don't want to ask. I'm an introvert. I don't want to have to ask, and it deters me from buying something because I can't read the sign. So if you have great handwriting, then do handwritten signs. In fact, I will say I have handwritten signs and I will share some here. You know, it's not hard to go onto Word or to go onto Canva. I love Canva, and write up a price sign. And like I mentioned earlier, it's also helpful to have like what the item is, you know, so gummy bears, $5, cheeky frogs, $15, etc. So that they don't just see the $5 price tag and you have in the vicinity some $5 items, but also some $15 items. You want to be very explicit about your pricing. So easy to read signage, must have. Also, something that engages customers is using interactive displays. And what I mean by this is, instead of just setting out your pickles, for example, on the table, maybe get a pickle jar to put them in. If you are doing like sushi, maybe get a little steamer basket to display them in. These unique things will make your customer smile. It adds a little personal touch to your booth and even might entice them to spend the money that they wouldn't normally, because they see it displayed in such a cute way. They can picture it in their own home, you know, even though they're not getting the display item with it. It still kind of psychologically tricks them to feel like they are. So using interactive displays is great. Let's talk for a second about the claw machine, because you might have seen some market videos about using a claw machine. I cannot personally speak to this, but I will say that I have my eye on one that I will link in the description, that I feel, just based on the markets that I've done, I feel like it would do really well. Instead of just putting out my gummy worms, for example, for $6, just laying on the table there, if I put those in the claw machine, they already sell well, but I think that they're just going to sell so much better, because I mean, who doesn't want to play a little claw machine? That's so fun. You would have to do like a $5, $6, however much to win, like play to win, because that's a little sketchy. I think it might even be considered gambling, which is illegal in a lot of states, a lot of countries too. If you just said like $5 to play, but if you don't win, oh well, you're out those $5. Like, that's just mean, especially since you know that it's going to be kids doing a lot of these things. So do a $5 play to win type situation, and you can put any items that you want in a claw machine. That also would probably attract a lot of attention to your booth. Maybe put it kind of on the outskirts of your booth, so that as people are walking by, they see like the hubbub and commotion and want to know what's happening. So claw machine might be fun. I'll have to give you guys an update on that. Let me know in the comments if you do markets and if you use the claw machine and how it is going for you. Okay, let's talk about creating a brand. Now, this is not something that you have to do. I just highly recommend it because it makes you look more professional. And there's nothing wrong with looking professional as a vendor. In fact, it is highly encouraged. If you look unprofessional, it might deter people from wanting to give you their credit card information, or even wanting to stop by and talk to you and shop at your booth. So to create a brand, I would recommend sticking with a color scheme. So for my example, for my channel and brand, the Celestial Homebody, my colors are like a periwinkle purple, a light pink, and a mint, like a kind of a muddy washed mint color. And I stick with those three colors throughout my displays. And we've spoken about the tablecloth thing. You can do colored tablecloths if you want to. Again, I don't like to, but I will, my banner will be my brand colors. All of my signage will be in my brand colors. I even have gone as far as making shirts, custom shirts for my husband and I to wear that are in brand colors with the logo. Font choices, I keep steadily amongst all my signs. The same fonts that I use on my YouTube channel are the same that I use on my signage, are the same that I used on my banner. I want to create a recognizable brand, right? And think of like the Golden Arches. You see those Golden Arches from a mile down the freeway, you know it's a McDonald's. You know that you're going to go there. You know exactly what your order is going to be because you ordered the same thing every time because they have brand recognition. And that's what you want to create too, instead of just a hodgepodge of different colors and fonts and everything. There is nothing wrong with that. If you are an unorganized person and proud of it, then my hat tips to you, my friend. I am not that way just naturally with my OCD. But I do think that it helps customers have trust in you and even create return customers. Maybe next year, if I go to the same fall festival that I did this past year, I will have people coming back and saying, I remember you from last year because they remember my shirts, they remember my signage, etc. So now that you've practiced setting up your display, you have all of your items priced, you've got your event locked in, it is the day of your market. What do you bring? Here is the most comprehensive list of things that I could think of. Get your notepad ready. Obviously, you need all of your inventory. So, all of your plushies. All of your signage, your price signs, your payment information signs, your banner, things like that. You want to maybe bring some extra duct tape, double-sided tape, regular Scotch tape. You're never going to know when you're going to use it. Zip ties are helpful to have. Your tables and your chair, your tent. If you have a little wagon, that might be helpful to bring because you don't know where you're going to park. If you're going to have to park far away from where your setup is, you might want a little something to help you carry all of your stuff to your spot. So a little wagon might be good. You want to bring a phone charger. If you have electricity. If you don't have electricity, instead of bringing a standard phone charger, bring like a portable charger like I have here. You want to bring your fan, as we discussed earlier, if that's something that you need. Snacks and drinks, very important to stay hydrated, especially for outdoor markets. Bring your hydro flask, your Stanley cup with extra ice, a little cooler, maybe with some ice, extra water bottles in it. Bring some snacks. If you are vending at a festival, a lot of your profit's gonna go toward food there because food truck food is insanely expensive. So if you're cheap like me and don't want to spend $25 on a mediocre lunch, then just bring your own food. I normally do bring a sandwich or something like I am going to elementary school. I pack my lunch in the morning of my markets. And then also something that you might want to bring is a work in progress. Any whips that you have, or if you have a feeling something's going to be a really good seller and you didn't make a ton of, and bring the yarn to make more of them. Don't forget to bring your polyfill. I have done that where I bring stuff and I make a bunch of skins of something and then I say, oh, I forgot my polyfill. So this is useless. I can't put them out on the table. So don't forget your stuffing. So that is everything that I could think of what to bring the day of your market. Oh, and obviously all your display stuff, your crates and your cube storage and all of that stuff. So now it is the day of your market. You have set up, you're eagerly awaiting your first customer. Let's talk about how to interact with customers. And to each their own on this one. As I have mentioned multiple times already, I am an introvert. I am an introvert with an extroverted personality, if you couldn't tell. I can happily carry on a conversation for a little bit of time, but at the end of the night, I need my me time. I need to recharge my social battery. I am perfectly fine staying at home, not talking to anybody for a month. So let's talk about people like me, how to interact with customers, because you might be like, should I greet them? Should I ignore them? What should I do? As the person that I am, when I have gone to events, not as a vendor, just as a patron in the past, you know, festival or whatever, it gives me extreme anxiety when vendors come out of their booth and come up to me and are like, hi, how are you today? I don't want to interact. I only like interacting when I want to interact. Okay. So, and a lot of people are like me. I know that I'm not alone on this one. Hands up in the comments if you're like me and you do not like being approached by people, and then it makes you feel really guilty because you really don't want to go look at their items. You got better things to do with your time. You don't want to spend your hard-earned money on what they have to offer because it's ugly or you just don't want it. It puts the customer in a really awkward position. On the other hand, you don't want to be so standoffish that they walk into your booth and you're just ignoring them and you're just working on crocheting or you're on your phone or whatever, because that's rude. So there is a very fine line, a happy medium that is essential to achieve. And what I do is when people come into my booth, I smile at them. I might even wave. I don't say anything yet. I just smile. And then if they talk to me, if they ask me how much something is, if they say, how are you today? Then I will put a smile on my face. I'm great. How are you? Thank you so much for stopping by. I always say that to people as they leave as well. But in general, I do not say the first word until the customer speaks. But I do acknowledge their existence. I'll look up from what I'm doing. Give them a nice big smile, wave at them. But as they leave, maybe, thank you so much for taking the time to look. Have a great day. That way they're not feeling like they have to come in and look and feel the pressure of buying something, because that's not fun for customers. So that is a fine line. Restocking the day of your market. You want to make your shelves not look bare, but also not look overly cluttered, as we discussed earlier. So what I like to do is if somebody buys something like a smaller item that I have back stock of, I replace it immediately the second that they leave. I think it's rude to restock while they're in your tent, but to each their own. You might want to restock right away. And I keep saying tent, by the way, because I have only done outdoor markets, but keep in mind that this all goes for indoor markets as well. Once they leave, I'll restock the item. If it's a bigger item that I only had one of, and they purchase it and leave, if I have another bigger item in back stock, then I'll replace it with just a different item. If I don't have any more larger items in back stock, then I will rearrange to kind of disperse the inventory a little bit more. You don't want gaps of items. And that also leads me to tips about fixing your displays. Inevitably, as people come in and out of your area, you're going to have things knocked over, things scrunched up, things not in the place that you left them. So it's essential that you take the time, you know, every little lull that you have of customers coming into your area, and you fix things up. You put the turtles, you know, standing back up. You just zhuzh things up a little bit to make it look presentable. So my very last tip for you today has to do with cleaning up after your event. And it's really this simple. Put things away with the next time in mind. And what I mean by that is, instead of just throwing your plushies in the totes, maybe take the time to put all of the like items that you display together into like a Walmart bag to put inside of your tote. Put all of your signs together. Don't just leave them stuck to the little sign holders or taped to the tablecloths. Take them all out of their sign holders or however you decided to display them. Put them all together. Put them in a Ziploc bag in your safe space, into your totes or whatever you're using to move stuff around. And then that way, next time you go to set up, you're not frantically going, where did I put my tape? Where did I put this. I thought I had 15 of these items and I only have 6. Where are the other half? Put things away with the next time in mind. There you have it, my friends, the ultimate guide to markets. Please let me know in the comments down below if I missed anything. And if you are just watching this video and you have not done markets yet, take a look at the comments if there are any. Hopefully there will be. But if there are any, because some other people might have some golden nuggets of information that you can also learn from. So spread the wealth with all of your market experience, my friends. Thank you so much for hanging with me on this very, very long video. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.